So here we are, man, Romans chapter 1, verse 16, the all famous verse, right? For I'm not ashamed of the gospel, because it is God's power for salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew and also to the Greek. What's he saying? The last part of that verse, this salvation is for all people. It's for whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord to be saved, can and will be saved, right? That's what he's saying. The Jews and the Gentiles, the Jews and the Greek. It's for everybody, man. But Paul, he's saying, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. And this is the part that I wonder if we kind of mull over top of it and we don't even give it any real consideration. What does Paul mean when he says, I'm not ashamed? The question is, can you be ashamed for something if you've never been shamed for it? Get that? Shamed for it and ashamed of it, right? So being ashamed, man, that's an emotional feeling. It's a regret that you have where you wish you hadn't have done something. If you could take it back, you would take it back, but you can't, and you feel ashamed. Typically, you see it, man, with people that get busted for doing something they shouldn't do on the way to jail, man. You see that they feel shame, they feel regret, they wish they hadn't have done it because now there's no way to get out of trouble. And the only way to not be in trouble is if they hadn't done it. So they feel with shame and they feel regret, wishing they hadn't done it. That's what Paul is saying. I'm not ashamed. I don't feel any regret, man. So if he feels that way, then he has to have faced something, man. There has to be some punishment on him. There has to be something on the forefront of this word, right? Something that would have tried to make him stop preaching the gospel. And he's saying, you can't make me stop. There's not going to be an emotional feeling in me of regret that causes me to think that I shouldn't do what I'm doing because it's the power of God living in me. So the word of God says, listen, it says this, it says that when we give our life to Jesus, that he actually comes inside of us, that Jesus sends his spirit. It's called the helper. It's inside of us. And that spirit causes us to do what Jesus demands that we do. But it also empowers us to do gospel work. It empowers us to be around other believers. It empowers us to tell non-believers about Jesus. It empowers us to turn from sin and turn to Jesus. If you've got the Spirit in you, you have to obey the Spirit because it's much stronger than what you really are. So you got the Spirit in you and it's telling you to preach the gospel and people are telling you to stop. You're not going to be ashamed because the Spirit's going to be greater than any regret that you might have. Paul, he says, I'm not ashamed. So what shame did Paul actually experience? In 2 Corinthians chapter 11, starting in 23, it says, are they servants of Christ? I'm talking like a madman. I'm a better one, with far more labors, many more imprisonments, with far worse beatings, near death many times. He says this, he says, 5 times I received 39 lashes from the Jews. 3 times I was beaten with a rod by the Romans. Once I was stoned by my enemies. 3 times I was shipwrecked. He says, I have spent night and day in the open seas. On frequent journeys I have faced dangers from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my own people, dangers from the Gentiles, dangers in cities and dangers in open countries, even dangers in the seas, and dangers among false brothers. Man, that's people that claim to be followers of Christ and really they're not. They turn their back. Or people won't go to church because people turn their back on them, right? Church people did. That's what he's saying, man. Dangers from false brothers. He says, labor and hardship, many sleepless nights, hunger and thirst, often without food, cold, and lacking clothing, man. This is Paul's life of ministry right here. And if that wasn't enough, he says, not to mention other things, there's still daily pressures on me because of the way that I care for all of the churches. So he's got all of this on top of him. And then deep down inside of him, man, he's worried to death about the church, man. How are they doing? Are they following Christ? Are they sticking to the word? Are they leading other people? Is the enemy trying to sneak in and steal them from the flock? Man, what is going on with the church? So he's got all this physical torment happening. You got the mental problems happening. You got the heart that aches from him. This is Paul's life, man. He poured himself out for Christ. And he says, even among all of this, I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it's the power of God working in me. In other words, what he's saying is I face all of this stuff, man. But it's not because of me. It's because of God. If it was because of me, man, I would have backed out a long time ago. But he says, because of God and his power, I can't back out. The Spirit of Christ is in me. It's causing me to act just like Christ. See where we draw the line between the believer and the non-believer? The non-believer tries to live a godly life, a Christian life, and people turn their back on him. And then the non-believer who tried to live like Christ, man, they run off. And then you wonder what happened. Were they saved? Were they not saved? They ran off. But the true believer, man, they give their life to Christ and nothing works out still, man. Things still fall apart. People still turn their back on them, and they don't stop. They don't stop. Even though they're frustrated and aggravated and they want to quit, they can't quit because the Spirit of God is working in them, man. So they're not ashamed. There's no regret that's going to cause them to back away because they live like Christ, because they got Christ in them. Do you got Christ in you? That's my question. If the Spirit of God is living in you, is it causing you to walk and talk and act just like Jesus? Or do you find that you just give up and you walk away? Because if you give up and walk away, man, then you really need to pray and ask Jesus, fill me with your Spirit. I want to give my life to you. I want to be part of your flock, man. And I want to be just like you. And I know in order to do that, you got to come and live inside of me and cause me to do what you want me to do. Watch. See if the way Paul acted doesn't mimic the way that Jesus acted. Look at the prophecy here in Isaiah chapter 53. This is talking about Jesus. It says, who has believed what we have heard? And who has the arm of the Lord been revealed to? He grew up before him like a young plant, like a root out of dry ground. He didn't have any impressive form or majesty that we should look at him, no appearance that we should desire him. It's talking about Jesus. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of suffering who knew what sickness was. He was like someone people had turned away from. He was despised and nobody valued him. Yet he, Jesus himself, bore our sickness and he carried our pains. But we, in turn, regarded him stricken, struck down by God and afflicted. But he was pierced because of our transgression. He was crushed because of our iniquity. Punishment for our peace was on him, and we are healed by his wounds. We all went astray like sheep. We have turned and we have gone our own way. And the Lord has punished him for our iniquities. We turned from God and Jesus got punished for it. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, like a sheep silent before his shears, he did not open his mouth. He was taken away because of oppression and judgment. And who considers his fate? For he was cut off from the land of the living. He was struck because of his people's rebellion. They made his grave with the wicked, and a rich man at his death. Although he had done no violence, he had not spoken deceitful, yet the Lord was pleased to crush him severely. See, Jesus, he done nothing wrong, man. He came for sinners. He came for you. He came for me. And we rejected him. We denied him. We cursed him. We took part in his death. But he wasn't ashamed for what he was doing. He was being shamed for it, but he wasn't ashamed of it. So even all of this stuff happened to him, he didn't give up. He didn't turn his back and he didn't walk away. Just like Paul, didn't give up, didn't turn his back, and didn't walk away. Because you and I, we got the Spirit of God living in us, and we're not ashamed of the gospel. We're not ashamed of it. And that's Romans chapter 1, verse 16.